Welcome to Stand Up and Holler. On this week's episode, we're going to discuss the offensive performance against USF, the quarterback situation, of course. Got to talk about that. The defensive performance against USF, and we'll end up with Truth or Emotion, another segment that we started last week. And for those of you who are looking at coming to this episode to hear about the Alabama preview, we're actually going to do a special extra episode focused entirely on the Bama game. We're going to record that Tuesday night, release it on Wednesday. And Will, before we get into it,
here's Cooper, four-man rush for Florida State, going to cut it loose. Phil Johnson caught it inside the 10. Phil Johnson on his feet. He'll cut back, and Jacksonville State has won at the Horn.
Did Jacksonville State just beat Florida State? Is that what I heard, Will?
I mean, no more Georgia Southern jokes, buddy. No more Georgia Southern jokes. That's the. I gotta be honest. I had stopped watching. It was 17-7. The Noles were ahead. Mike Norvell had already pulled Mackenzie Milton 9 minutes into the game. And, I was like, oh, they got this one well in hand. And then you texted me midnight and said Florida State managed to lose that one. And I'm like, what?
I could not believe. I was kind of faded in and out there on the couch watching that game, watching the end of it, and I just that Hail Mary hit, and I just sprung right up. I'm like, oh my god, I can't believe what I just saw.
Well, put it this way: I've watched is that Hail Mary, and we definitely have our first two-time winner of the Kirby Awards coming up later this week because Norvell is absolutely getting the Kirby on this one. I can guarantee it.
I think Kirby Smart's going to maybe petition for a rename of the award if you keep giving it to Mike Norvell. Well, he might have to look into that.
I don't know, man. I've gotten enough flack from Georgia fans that I really, really love calling it the Kirby.
Yeah, it just flows. It's natural. It's a natural fit. All right, let's go on to two bits here. We're going to look at the offensive performance here against USF. Before I dive into that, though, career win number 100 for Coach Mullen. So congrats to Coach on that. A lot of positives on the day. 26 first downs, most total yards in Mullen's time at Florida here, 666 total, 303 passing, 363 rushing on 44 attempts. We saw 12 explosive plays of 10 or more yards on the day, 7 runs, 5 passes, so pretty even there. 3 rushes from Dameon Pierce, 4 directly from Emory Jones, 2 passes, 2 runs, 5 directly from Anthony Richardson, who did not take nearly as many snaps. I think some of the highlights you include there, that Jacob Copeland pass from Richardson, the 75-yard touchdown the first quarter. That Emory Jones pass to Xavier Henderson, 35-yarder down the sideline. That was a pretty pass right there. But Richardson comes back in the second quarter. He basically makes 2 linebackers look like they're nothing, evades the blitz, goes around the edge, stiff arms another linebacker, no big deal. Hits Copeland on another beautiful play on the second quarter where he rolls out to the left and just throws a beautiful ball in there to Copeland to put the Gators inside the red zone. We saw it all day. We know how Richardson's day ended on that 80-yard run, as Will called it. Didn't you have a title for that run?
I don't remember. Did I have a title for that run?
The hamstring heard around the world?
That's right. I said that before it came out, didn't I?
I thought it was a good line. I was trying to set you up. I'm sorry, man.
I'm tired, man. I was up late. I didn't even remember what I said 5 minutes ago.
Yeah. So anyway, good day for the offense overall. I know we got a quarterback situation to talk to, which we'll get to in 4 bits, but in general, Will, what did you think about the offense? We saw a little more from the passing game today than we did against FAU, which was encouraging.
Yeah, I mean, so 9.7 yards per play, which is dominant from an offensive perspective. 666 yards, 8.3 yards per rush. I think we were right around 8 last week as well against FAU. So the offensive line's doing its job. The running game doing its job. Obviously, Anthony Richardson's doing his job, adding to that yards per rush average. But, 363 yards rushing, yes, 115 of that is Richardson, but that also means that, 235 of it is not Richardson. And so, and some of it was Emory Jones. He had a really nice run for a touchdown as well. And so, I think what you see is that the running quarterbacks are opening some things up. I think the offensive line is improving. Certainly, if you average 8 yards a rush for all season long, you expect that you're going to be able to put up points. We had the first 3 and out. There was a throw that Emory Jones sort of airmailed to Jacob Copeland that would have been a first down there. And then after that drive, touchdown, 5 straight. All of a sudden, it's 35-3. Florida, it's a laugher. And then things sort of bogged down a little bit. You had a couple of interceptions from Emory Jones. Then you had the 2 where they turned the ball over on downs deep in enemy territory. And those are probably 2 that sort of stick with you and go, this could have been 49-3 or 49-13, I guess, at that point after the 2 interceptions. Florida had to score 42 points. They probably left at least 17 points out there.
Similar theme from the FAU game.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's one of those things where you look at the raw numbers and you go, these things are going to start to even out. Right. And one of the reasons that I look at yards per play is that tends to correlate with scoring over the course of the year, and turnovers tend to be a game specific thing. So you look at a turnover and you lose the turnover battle against LSU 4-1. Yeah, you're usually going to lose that game. But over the long haul, yards per play is important, and Florida's offense is performing really well in that metric.
Yeah, so really not much to complain about offensively. You could sit there and talk about the second half. There's certainly some sloppiness, some things to clean up overall, but you like what you've seen from the run game. You like what you've seen from the passing game. Give me one area you really want to see cleaned up and improved heading into Bama for us to have a shot in that game.
Turnovers. You can't turn the ball over. I mean, really, if you think about that, 2 times turn it over on downs down in enemy territory, 2 interceptions, you've got 4 turnovers essentially in the game. You're not going to be able to put together 35 straight points against Alabama. You're probably going to be able to get down in the red zone 3, 4, maybe 5 times, and you need to have 31, 35 points when you've done that, because the Tide are going to come in and score as well. And so that's the thing, right, is that I actually thought, and we'll get to this in the quarterback section, but I thought both quarterbacks play. I mean, Anthony Richardson was otherworldly. I think Emory Jones actually played pretty well for the most part. And so when you look at that, it's the turnovers that are really making everybody just sort of scratch their head. You got to take care of the ball. And if the ball gets out late, that's a problem. And so that's the thing I think needs to get cleaned up, is the ball either needs to not go out or it needs to make sure it's out on time. And then that's sort of the thing that you'll be looking for next week, because I guarantee you Nick Saban's going to try to find a way to bait them into throwing the ball late, changing up coverages after the snap, those sorts of things that'll confuse a young quarterback.
Feeling good about the offensive line after what you saw against USF?
Yeah, except it looked like Gene DeLance was injured at the end of the game. That was something I saw. Donovan Kaiser had put a tweet up that showed him on the bench while they were singing the alma mater, and the reason he was sitting over there was because he was injured. So it'll be interesting to see what the prognosis is, and certainly we've got more than one injury to talk about. But we'll see what the prognosis is, because DeLance, for all of the criticism that he's gotten, has played really well this year. Same thing with Stuart Reese, and so obviously against inferior opponents, but those are the guys they had out there starting, which means those are the guys they felt comfortable with. And certainly you don't want to have those guys out when you got the Tide coming in next week.
Any concern about the tight end room? I know we saw that attempted throw in the back of the end zone to Elksness, but it doesn't seem like they're super involved right now. Is that just a reduction of the passing game in general, that you're just not seeing the tight end as involved this year?
Yeah, I think it's that the tight end isn't the first read on a lot of different throws. And when you think about a guy like Anthony Richardson, he's really not making 3 different reads. He's looking at the pre-snap read, and if the pre-snap read tells him his first guy's going to be open, he's able to dance around and get enough time in the pocket to have that guy come open. The Copeland throw that you mentioned when he was rolling to his left was like that. It was something where from the pre-snap configuration, you knew that you were going to have one-on-one on the outside in that corner. And so all he had to do was make sure he got enough time, because it was a long developing route. I think from the standpoint of the tight ends, they're usually going to be the second or the third read. Last year, maybe you would have made Pitts the first read in the progression. And then the other thing is that the defense can dictate that, right? So the defense can dictate whether that's your first read or not as well. And I think if you were an opposing defense looking at Emory Jones in particular, the first thing you'd want to do is challenge him to throw the ball to the outside, challenge him to throw the ball to the wide receivers. And so you're going to take away things like the tight end on little curls right down the middle for, 5 or 6 yards, or even down the seam. You're not going to give him those sorts of things. You want him to throw the ball to the outside.
Saw some good runs out of Dameon Pierce. I mentioned him in the explosive play department. Certainly powerful first touchdown run there. Saw a good run around to the left side too early on in the game. What do you think about the running back room after 2 weeks here?
I mean, it's interesting that Pierce, he goes for, he goes for what, 5 for 55, most of it in that first drive, and then we don't really see him again. Naquan Wright 7 for 36, Demarcus Bowman 3 for 33, Malik Davis 7 for 22. So Davis, Wright, and Pierce get the bulk of the carries, but Bowman sort of seems like the most explosive guy out of all of them. Had a 26-yard run in there as part of his 3 for 33. So the question in terms of who you're going to get the ball to, Lingard 5 for 21. They've kind of just sort of evenly dispersed it. I guess it was a little bit more for Pierce this time, but not in terms of numbers. So I'm comfortable with it because, 55, 36, 33, 22, 21, none of them got more than 7 carries. None of them got less than 3. So you're getting 5, 6, 7 yards per rush. And if you're getting that sort of stuff, then obviously you're going to be able to move the ball. And that's what we've seen with Florida. The one thing I think that I'd like to see in the run game is it does feel like they stalled when they get down inside the 10. Right. Mm-hmm. So they're able to get 5, 6, 7 yards when the defense doesn't know whether the quarterback's going to keep it or whether he's going to throw the ball and all that sort of stuff. But once it really comes down to big boy football down in the red zone, that's one of the places where they've struggled the last 2 weeks. Right. There've been the play before Emory Jones sort of ran the weird quarterback sneak on 4th down. Malik Davis got hit in the backfield and dropped for a 1-yard loss that set that up on 3rd down. Same thing today. There were a couple of opportunities. I think one was a direct run by Emory Jones when he came in after Anthony Richardson's helmet popped off, ran a direct snap, and just nothing was there. And so that's maybe the one thing that you quibble about. But again, 363 yards rushing this week, 400 last week. Anybody who was critical of the offensive line last year, I think has to at least take a step back and say, for the first 2 games this year, they've done just about everything they can.
Yeah, and certainly had the talent advantage, and very interested to see how that looks here coming into Bama. But we'll focus on what we've seen for now and move into 4 bits. Mullen's post-game comments on Anthony Richardson. He does a lot of special things. He doesn't always do the right thing, but he does special things. We got to keep coaching him to be efficient and make sure we're making all the right reads. Mullen then takes a bit of a turn to address the quarterback, where he's at on the quarterback situation as a whole. He says, we have 2 quarterbacks who are pretty talented guys that can make plays happen out there on the field. There are a lot of things a quarterback has to do, a lot of different reads. I have great appreciation. Our fans have great appreciation of watching great athletes out there on the field. We have 2 quarterbacks right now that can make great plays out there, both very efficient in the first half and situations in the second half. It's a long season, and we have young quarterbacks that have to continue to grow and develop into being really good football players. And so, Will, what that says to me is that we're going to be in for a season of this, and this is not going to be, Emory Jones is not going to get forgotten anytime soon, despite the fact that you look at Anthony Richardson, like you called him, the guy's just otherworldly coming in the game at times. Mullen is preaching patience to the fan base, basically, and saying, hey, there's 2 talented guys here to develop. And for those of you who want to jump on Emory Jones, and we'll certainly talk about the mistakes here in a minute, but there were a lot of good plays yesterday by Emory Jones. Saw a lot of positives too yesterday with Emory Jones. It wasn't just, you could harp on the couple of mistakes, but he's getting the bulk of the playing time too. He also has more opportunity to make those mistakes right now.
Yeah, I mean, so I think if you'd have told me that Emory Jones put up the stats that he did yesterday, I would have said it was a market improvement from FAU, right? Now, the turnovers are still concerning. There's no doubt about that. You can't turn the ball over, back-to-back drives in the second half, even when you're up, right? And Florida, the last couple of years, has been kind of complacent in the 3rd and 4th quarters when they've gotten up big, and we've sort of seen that the last couple of weeks. And, last year when we were playing Tennessee and Kentucky and all those teams, we were saying you can't be complacent in the 4th quarter. It's eventually going to come back and bite you. And sure enough, against LSU and Alabama, the complacency did start to bite them, particularly against LSU. So all that being said, I have his yards above replacement yesterday at 0.83, which is like right around Jake Fromm back in like 2017. So pretty good player, right? 6.9 yards per attempt. through the air. So below average through the air, undoubtedly, but 6.2 yards per rush. So way above average in terms of a running quarterback. The problem is that he's being compared to a guy who is just an enormous Kyler Murray. Right. I mean, Kyler Murray's like 5'10", running all over the place. Nobody can catch him, and was able to throw the ball. I mean, Anthony Richardson's 240 pounds, and nobody can catch him when he gets out in the open field either. I mean, he pulls a hamstring and they can't catch him. Right? They dive. He comes up lame, and he's still running away from him, even though he's got a bad hamstring. I mean, he touched the ball 7 times yesterday, 3 passes, 4 rushes, and he was the leading rusher and the leading passer on the team. So, as much as like I'd love to be supportive of Emory Jones and what he's doing, and I do think he got better, and I do think he can be a good quarterback. It's just unbelievable what Anthony Richardson's doing, and the idea that he doesn't check to the right run every once in a while, so you're going to pass up 80-yard runs and 75-yard passes seems a bit short-sighted. Again, I'm not the head coach of the University of Florida. I don't make $7 or $8 million a year, but I'll take a couple of bad checks where the running back gets hit in the backfield if you get this sort of stuff all the time. Because, geez, I mean, his yards above replacement was 7.95 in the game against FAU. It was 33 yesterday against USF. I mean, every time he averaged 38 yards a play. I mean, when you think about how much better he is above average, I mean, it makes sense it'd be 33, right? Because usually you're going to average 4, 5, 6 yards a play. He averaged 38 yards per play yesterday. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah, part of the issue with Emory you look at too is it seems to be he's still struggling with some bad reads and bad decisions, and he even called himself out in the post game. He said the first one he did not think the cornerback was going to break away that quickly. The corner drops into the flat in the zone. We saw him pick it off pretty easily, take it down inside the 10-yard line where USF ends up settling for a field goal. The second one, he said he was waiting for another guy to come open. And then he goes back to Trent Whittemore late. The safety who had dropped down into his zone there drops back, picks off the ball rather easily, ends up setting a USF touchdown drive in the second half. So we also saw a couple of decisions where it was in USF players' hands. We saw the one in the end zone where he didn't get enough loft on the ball. He seems to have a line drive type of mentality sometimes where he's going to zip it in there no matter what, where the touch isn't always there with Emory either. And again, we're picking on Emory a little bit in terms of some of his bad plays. The guy overall had a pretty good game minus a few mistakes here.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the problem is you're playing USF, right? And so the expectation is that you're going to blow USF off the field. And once Florida got up 35-3, everything stagnated. The other thing is that he made bad reads that turned into interceptions. He also made some bad reads that didn't turn into interceptions that he was able to get away with. One in particular, after Anthony Richardson's helmet popped off, I diagrammed it in my article today, where he had Jacob Copeland open in the end zone, and instead he threw into basically what amounted to quadruple coverage with Trent Whittemore flashing across the back of the end zone. And so again, I think it sort of comes down to people can see that he was late on the first throw of the game where he threw the ball to a receiver on a curl. I can't remember who the receiver was, but he threw it and it was late, and the defender was able to get a hand on it because it was late. And that has been even the long throw to Henderson down the sideline. He was just a tick late, right? He's almost flat-footed, and then he decides to throw and lets go of the ball. Again, played pretty well yesterday, except for if he'd have thrown 4 interceptions, we'd be having a very different conversation. There was an opportunity for that sort of stuff to happen yesterday. And we all know that USF is not Alabama. And so you look at it, you go, okay, well, that might be what's coming is now that we're playing against a team that's considerably better. At the same time, I mean, again, you mentioned Anthony Richardson hasn't had as many reps. Obviously, he can't get as many reps because every time he touches the ball, he gets a touchdown and then he's out the next series. So, it's hard to judge other than by what you've seen. And the guy put up a 75-yard touchdown and an 80-yard touchdown this week, and he put up a 70-plus yard touchdown last week against FAU. It's been a long time. I would say Percy Harvin's the last time Florida had a guy who every time he touched the ball, you thought it might turn into a touchdown. Anthony Richardson's that kind of guy. And so it makes complete sense that the fan base and even analysts on, college football final and everybody but Dan Mullen seems to understand that guy needs to be on the field because he has the ability to turn something into or nothing into a touchdown every time he's out there. Yeah, he has some stuff to learn. I'm sure he does. I highlighted something a couple of weeks ago, right before the season started, from the Oklahoma game, where he wasn't making the right read. But it turned out he was late on a throw down the middle. that was for a touchdown, and he completely missed a wide open running back in the flat and turned it into a 30-yard run. So last year, even though he was missing stuff even though he was missing reads in the Oklahoma game, he was making something happen. And so if his hamstring's healthy, it's pretty obvious. And, I think Dan Mullen, we didn't know what we had in Kyle Trask back behind Felipe Franks, but the expectation is that Dan Mullen would know that, right? And then Trask comes in and immediately is just playing way better than Felipe Franks did at any point in his career. And so I think there's a little bit of reticence from the fan base to have that happen again, right? Where you'd have a guy out there who's playing. I mean, Franks was not playing bad when he was injured against Kentucky, but he was inconsistent through some bad interceptions, averaged something like 8.5 yards per completion, but it wasn't something where Florida's offense was dynamic. And the minute you brought in Trask, Florida's offense was dynamic. It's the exact same feel between Emory Jones and Anthony Richardson. And again, Felipe Franks is in the NFL. He was very good for Arkansas last year. He was even really good for Florida before he got injured in 2019. But I don't think anybody wants to go back and say, I don't think at any point anybody's going to say, yeah, I wish Kyle Trask hadn't played, because we know what we saw when we saw that. And I think we're seeing the same thing with Anthony Richardson right now.
This stat comes from the UF communications department. With 115 rushing yards rushing and 152 yards passing at 3 for 3 in the game, quarterback Anthony Richardson became the first FBS player in the last 25 seasons to rush for 100 plus yards and pass for 150 plus yards and complete every pass he threw. Granted, it was 3 for 3, but I think what we saw yesterday is Richardson comes in and we saw him throw the ball a little more. That was a question we had last week. I certainly don't have any reservations about his ability to take the ball downfield. I saw that pass rolling out to the left to Copeland. I mean, the first pass, Copeland was just wide open. You just need to lay it in there. Nice pass and everything. But that second pass, he was covered. He had a step on the guy maybe, but to make that pass while rolling to your left as you're about to get hit, Richardson could do it all. The guy is an absolute animal. And like that stat, I like that stat because it points out first FBS player in the last 25 seasons. And the point is like, I think this guy has the ability to have a lot of stats behind him that have first player in X amount of seasons to do this. He is something special that you just don't see come along very often. And that's not a shot at Emory Jones, has nothing to do with Emory Jones. Anthony Richardson just might be the next big thing for the Florida Gators. On the other hand here, Will, I'm not sure how much experience you have with you ever pull a hammy? You ever pull a hamstring?
I have.
Yeah. So how many weeks does that take to kind of heal up and get normal?
About 2 months.
Yeah. Maybe a guy who's working on it day to day, you got at least a month, people. And so you're not going to see, I will sit here and be the first to guarantee that Anthony Richardson's not going to run for 80 yards against Alabama for a touchdown. However, I think you could probably get it to a point with the right training and everything where we might be able to see him come in and I worry though, it's the right leg pushing off that back leg. Will, how much of an impact is that hamstring going to have for us to see him against Alabama?
Well, I mean, I think obviously the minute he went down, we all got concerned, right? I mean, and not even went down. He was still outrunning the opposition. But I mean, here's the deal, right? Is he's averaged 17.5 yards per attempt through the air on 11 throws. He's averaged 25 yards per rush on 11 rushes with two over 70 yards. So, that is a huge part of his game, right? It's a huge part of the appeal. It's a huge part of why the throws are open, because the defense has to respect it. If you again, I diagrammed this in my article that came up this morning, but there were a couple of times where he got one-on-one coverage. Both throws to Copeland actually were one-on-one coverage that he could see immediately after the snap, because the safeties had to give away their position because they were worried about him putting up an 80-yard run, right? And so again, I think Alabama is going to sit there and say, prove it to us, right? We'll give you 6, 7, 8 yards. In fact, we probably want you to run if you've got a hamstring that's all wrapped up and that sort of stuff. We'd rather have you run than throw the ball downfield. We're not going to give that to you. We'll see, right? I mean, one, he's an incredibly athletic person. 2, it doesn't look like it's that serious. Like a lot of times somebody pulls a hamstring and like a really bad pull, you can't even get up off the field, or you're limping the entire time. By the time that he got ice on it, didn't come back in the game. But then by the time the game was over, he was walking around without the ice on it, maybe a slight limp, but nothing nothing terrible. So the question will be the explosion, right? I mean, the thing about a hamstring injury is it's not just about will you pull it, will you make it worse, does it hurt, those sorts of things. It's that it zaps the explosion that you have, and obviously that's a big part of his game. And so, the part that Mullen talks about in terms of the mistakes that he makes, a lot of times he can get away with those things because he's able to run and get out of the grasp of the defense. If he's not able to do that, that'll limit his ability to do it. But again, he's averaging 17 and a half yards a throw. So I think you give him the benefit of the doubt. You say even a Anthony Richardson at 80% is somebody that's worth putting in there, and somebody that you think that you figure you can get something out of, assuming that you're not going to injure him worse by having him in there. Because I mean, personally, I would rather sit him in the Alabama game and have him healthy 2 or 3 weeks from now than try to play him in the Alabama game, injure him further, and then not be able to see what you really have in him by the end of the year. Because, I think I've watched enough of this defense to be concerned about what's going to happen when we play Alabama and when we play Georgia. And so I think the biggest thing that we need to figure out at the end of the year is who is our quarterback, even if that means that you lose a game to Alabama, even if that means you lose a game to Georgia. Obviously, I want to win those. But if we have Anthony Richardson available for the last 5 or 6 games of the year because he didn't play against Alabama, I think that's worth it. If you're going to sacrifice those 6 games, if he happens to be able to, if there's a risk that he's going to injure the hamstring more against Alabama.
If he did not injure the hamstring, you'd be calling for him to take the bulk of the snaps next week?
I'd be calling for them to actually switch him, right? So Emory Jones had 22 attempts and then 13 rushing attempts. And Richardson had 3 pass attempts and 4 rushing attempts. I think a 50-50 split or even switching it the other way, because I think one of the things that we've been talking about now for basically all offseason is that you're going to need 2 guys, because guys in the SEC get nicked up over time, right? You get running quarterbacks, they're going to get hit, they're going to get dinged. And so you need someone in an offense with a running quarterback who's going to be able to step in. I mean, just a few years ago, Nick Fitzgerald had that gruesome ankle injury when he was one of Mullen's quarterbacks. So Mullen's clearly aware that he's going to need 2 guys who can go out there and get the job done. So this is part of it, right? I mean, obviously you don't think of a hamstring injury as something that's going to happen from getting hit, but it's, you're making an athletic play, you're running to the end zone, you're trying to outrun somebody, they dive for you, sort of catch your heel. It gets a little bit awkward when you plant, and all of a sudden you tweak your hamstring a little bit. Okay, well, that's going to happen, right? And that'll probably happen to Emory Jones as well at some point along the year. And then Anthony Richardson will get more snaps because of it. So, I think it's a little bit overblown in terms of who starts and who doesn't. But I do think that the snaps need. If Richardson hadn't been injured, it would be clear to everyone, including the players, which I think is the most important part, that it would be clear to the players that the snaps needed to start drifting more over towards Anthony Richardson, and that's what we'd see.
Well, we're still going to see plenty of Emory Jones involvement, and this game just went from maybe drifting toward Anthony Richardson to kind of keeping it at least where it's at for now for the Alabama game. This game's going to be heavily on Emory Jones next weekend.
Yeah, I would expect so, and good, right? I mean, I think all of us want to see Emory Jones succeed. It's just we've all been watching the last 2 weeks. We all have eyes, and we're sitting there just every time Anthony Richardson touches a ball, it turns into a touchdown. So, and part of it is he hasn't had to execute the red zone because he keeps losing his helmet, and then Emory Jones comes in, and they sort of stall. But we have not seen Anthony Richardson execute in the red zone yet, because he hasn't gotten him down there into the red zone because he keeps hitting such explosive plays. And so that's the thing that I think that maybe is missing from the conversation is, we haven't seen him in a situation where someone stops that 80-yard run and makes it a 12-yard run, and you got to sort of make your way down the field slowly. And is he going to be capable of doing that, or does he have to hit the home run in order for them to score? You'd prefer the home run because the home run's quick, it's energetic, the whole team gets energized, and then you don't have to worry about red zone efficiency. But that is one of the things that we're going to have to see. Now, conversely, Florida hasn't been very efficient in the red zone with Emory Jones at quarterback, and that's going to have to improve.
Right. So the biggest knock on Anthony Richardson is he keeps running for 80-yard touchdowns, and you'd like to see him do a full drive.
Something like that. Look, Ben, I mean, if you told me to choose between the two and I only had to choose one, we all know who we're choosing. And quite honestly, we know who Dan Mullen's choosing. right? And if he chose anybody other than Richardson after those first two games, he's crazy. And again, that's not a knock at Emory Jones. It's just that Anthony Richardson has come out and been the best player in the country for 2 straight weeks, and they just keep giving him like 5 touches a game, like, or 7 touches a game. Like, it doesn't make any sense. At some point, you got to get that guy the ball 15, 20, 25 times, because, you know, you're going to need to score in the SEC, and because the 80-yard run, you are going to get caught from behind, right? When you're playing against SEC speed, you might not get caught behind when you're playing USF speed.
And the other side of it is Emory Jones has a great opportunity this week to really swing the conversation his direction a little bit, because he's going to carry the bulk of the load against Alabama after that hamstring injury, in my opinion. We'll see how bad it actually, maybe it was a tweak. I don't know. Maybe it was just a tweak and not a full-on pull. We'll see how that goes. All right, let's jump into 6 bits where we'll talk about the defensive performance against USF. 20 first downs allowed, 5 of 17 on third down. Like to see that. 297 total yards, 188 passing, 109 rushing split. You saw a sack, just one sack on the day. In their face a little more. I felt like USF had the game plan to get the ball out quick, though. After watching that FAU film, there wasn't a whole lot of downfield shots there. They were getting the ball out quick for the most part. Kyer Elam, 6th career pick, 6 tackles for Tyron Hopper and Chris Bogle, career highs. Seeing some of those young guys continue to develop on the defensive side. USF, they strung together a 17-play drive in the first half, in which Cade Fortin just couldn't miss. Apparently he had that in him. Resulted in a field goal. And we saw an 8-play drive that ended in downs on the UF 33, thanks to some good pressure there from the UF defense. 2 interceptions from Emory Jones set up the USF offense to convert into 10 points, those turnovers into 10 points. The USF offense started those drives on the UF 10 and the UF 43, respectively. So that was at the hands of the offense. The special teams also put the defense in a bad spot one time with a 44-yard punt return, which set USF up at the UF 27-yard line. So that set up the last touchdown, which screwed the cover, by the way. Come on. Florida. So that's 2 touchdowns, Will. The 2 touchdowns they scored were set up by either a turnover or bad punt return, and one of their field goals was set up by one of the interceptions as well. So overall, I'd say the defense was frustrating at times yesterday, but overall, I think they brought it. You could certainly point to plenty of mistakes. We saw some blown coverages that weren't converted. We saw that trick play early on where the guy was just streaking wide open, dropped the ball on the throwback pass there. There's certainly plenty of areas to point out, but maybe a little bit of improvement here.
I mean, yeah. So, I mean, the defense got a little bit better, but I mean, we weren't playing a better offense than last week. What I would say is, when I went back and looked at the stats for USF this week were almost identical to the stats that they put up against NC State last week. The only difference is that, like you said, Florida turned the ball over twice, gave up a big punt return, and so that set up 17 of USF's 20 points. And so if those things hadn't happened, if you don't have the interceptions, maybe if Emory Jones drives them down for a field goal, you're looking at a 45-3 game, almost the exact same score as against NC State. Everybody's a little bit happier, but that sort of goes to the crux of it, right? NC State got beat by Mississippi State pretty handily this weekend. And so is being NC State good enough? And the answer is in the SEC East, it might be good enough against Vanderbilt and Missouri and Kentucky. It's not going to be good enough against Georgia and Alabama. And that's what we're looking at, right? We got Alabama coming into town next week, which is why people are sitting there looking at it saying, yeah, we'd love to feel better about the team. What I'll say is, in the second quarter, they gave up 1.9 yards per play, 6 pass attempts for 1 yard. So they were absolutely able to shut down Fortin there in that second quarter. Timmy McClain, when he came in the third quarter, fourth quarter, was better. He was actually better last week. I was surprised that they started Fortin, to be honest with you. But again, in the fourth quarter, 6.8 yards per play. That was a problem last week as well, giving up a lot of yards in the fourth quarter. If you're going to play a prevent defense, the whole point is to prevent big plays, and they gave up a bunch of big plays in the fourth quarter again. So not a complete game by any stretch of the imagination. I think we saw a lot of guys out there. I think we saw some improvement. Like you said, USF was trying to get the ball out quick, but at the same time, 1 sack, 1 quarterback hurry. That's really not enough when the opposing team throws the ball 30 times. And, so there's things to work on. I think there are There were clearly things that you could see, especially with the second corner, whether it was Avery Helm or whether it was Jason Marshall. Those guys are getting caught. They're not jamming at the line of scrimmage when they're playing press coverage, and then they're getting beat by a step or two. And then if the quarterback underthrows it by a step or two, it's an easy pass interference every time. I guarantee you're going to see that this week for Alabama. And then the other thing is when they didn't play press coverage, when they had when they had a deep safety, there were a couple of times the safety wasn't where he was supposed to be. And so it's hard to play press coverage if your safeties aren't going to be where you need them to be to help you double. Kyrie Elam played really, really well, though. I thought, the interception was a really great indication of how to get your hands on a receiver without actually getting called for pass interference, because he grabbed the receiver and kind of caused the interception, but he did it before the ball was in the air, which is the thing that you hope Avery Helm and Jason Marshall start learning, is you get your hands on the receiver before the ball's in the air, sort of knock them off the rhythm that they have with their quarterback, and then all of a sudden you've got an opportunity. I didn't see a lot of guys flashing. It wasn't like I saw Tyron Hopper or Derek Wingo or any of those guys, any of the real young guys up front causing a whole lot of havoc. And they were okay against the run, 41 for 109, so 2.7 yards per rush. But the quarterbacks, were a big part of that. So the quarterbacks had 10 rushes for 5 yards. So if you eliminate that, you still gave up over 100 yards to their running backs in 31 carries. So okay, but not fantastic. And I think that's the story, right? Is okay, but not fantastic can get you wins over Kentucky. It's not. The question is, can it get you a win over Alabama?
I almost think statistically it looks better than it actually felt when you were watching it. I think some of those instances, because USF, you might give up less yardage because USF had short fields on a few of those drives there. You didn't feel like there wasn't really a point where you felt like, I know you mentioned the stats of the second quarter, but it just didn't feel like the defense was dictating the USF as much as maybe USF was maybe missing on a play here or there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's true, but I think that's true all the time. I think the issue that Florida had is that they didn't get any pressure on the quarterback, and they were blitzing from time to time and still couldn't get there. And when you blitz and don't get any pressure on the quarterback, that puts a lot of pressure on your defensive backs. The defensive backs aren't good enough right now to be able to handle that, and so you get exposed, right? So then what do? Well, then you start playing softer coverage, because you play the softer coverage that allows your defensive backs to not make a big mistake. Well, but that softer coverage allows a team to get a 17-play, 75-yard drive that takes up 6 minutes. The other thing is that Florida immediately turned around, right? And we were, I think part of it is that we were so busy sort of arguing, at least on Twitter, about Emory Jones versus Anthony Richardson, that we didn't really notice that Florida put up 5 straight touchdowns. And all of a sudden it's 35-3, and that the defense had turned them over quite a bit, right? That they did. Now the thing is, after the 17-play drive, they then had an 8-play drive where they turned the ball over on downs, right? They had 4th and 3 at Florida's 33, and decided to, after a tackle for loss on 3rd and 1, they drove them back to the 33. And so that was 2 straight times that they had driven down the field against Florida's defense. But from there, 3 and out. And then 4 plays, they had a 13-yard run that set them up on the next drive, but it was only 4 plays, and then 4 plays again the next one. So going into the half, a couple of 3 and outs, a couple of 4-play drives, Florida's in charge 35-3. If the defense had put up the same performance in the second half, and if Emory Jones doesn't throw those 2 interceptions, like let's just say Florida punts, right, and USF has to go the length of the field, I think the game feels different from the standpoint of Florida being, I guess, more in control. It's not like Florida was ever really out of control. Richardson hits that big run to go up 42-13. You're like, yeah, that's a wrap. And even before that, you're really sort of like, yeah, that's a wrap. It just felt dead on the offensive side of the ball. You kind of felt like a turnover would help, or you felt like a sack would help, and that just never came. And so that's been sort of my word for the last 2 games. Florida's defense feels kind of slow. It just doesn't feel like there's a difference maker out there who, when you go, hey, we need a play, that guy's going to bring it. Now, maybe Zach Carter's that guy, and he just didn't bring it this week because it was hot. They were playing USF, and they were rotating a lot of different guys in there in the second half. But that's the thing I think we need against a team like Alabama or a team like LSU or a team like Georgia. We're going to need somebody on the defensive line specifically to say, I'm getting to the quarterback and driving his guy back to the quarterback.
Well, the test is finally here for that defense that we've been talking about all offseason, Will. But let's move on to the dollar. And before we make any big statements here, we'll go into truth or emotion and just remind you that we just want to know, we're going to make a statement. Is there some truth to what we're saying, or are we completely overreacting, being too emotional here? So I'm going to start with that defense, and I'm going to make the optimistic statement. Well, through 2 games, the defense is improving, and we can feel good about it going into the Alabama game.
I think that's emotion. That's the emotion is hope, because we hope that the defense is better. But what I saw in the first half yesterday, I think we're going to have to. It's going to be take the over. Is my advice for the Alabama game. I don't care what it is, take the over. I expect Florida's offense to be able to score on Alabama's, and I expect Alabama's offense to absolutely score on Florida's. I don't think the defense is at a place now. I mean, you might say they've improved, but improved from what? Right. And I think that's an important characteristic. They were struggling to get off the field against FAU. There were a couple of times where they struggled to get off the field against USF yesterday. And now they're going to be against a team that doesn't struggle to stay on the field all that often. And I think we're going to see how far we are away from being an elite defense. And I suspect it's a fair ways.
Statement number 2, a patient approach toward Emory Jones's development will pay off in the long run for the Gators.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. I think there's a couple of things to that. One is that I think he got better from week 1 to week 2. The other thing is, look, you've got 2 dual threat quarterbacks, and even if Richardson's better, you're going to have injuries throughout the year, and you're going to need somebody to step in. And then the third part is that, Dan Mullen is loyal to a fault. And there are times where it feels like he's being more loyal than he should be. But that has to pay off down the road, you would think, with different recruits that he's trying to bring in, or people when, one of the things is that we've got a huge track record of recruiting winning championships. What we don't have is a track record of that sort of recruiting in the age of the transfer portal. And I think in the age of the transfer portal, making sure that you're loyal to your players is going to be more important, right? Emory Jones was loyal. He stayed. He could have transferred out last year before the season when he knew Kyle Trask was going to be the starter. He decided to stay. And he would have gotten to play immediately based on the way the transfer rules were being interpreted at the time, and now the way the transfer rules are. And so I don't think this is a situation where you can just say, no, we're going to put you on the bench, and then you're going to get enough of a cameo that Jacksonville State's going to give you an opportunity to be the quarterback. I think what you want to do is set things up to where even if you decide to move on from Emory Jones, and even if Emory Jones decides to move on from you at the end of the year, there's enough tape out there that he gets a good opportunity at whatever place he's going to transfer to. And, hey, maybe he turns it around and he already has gone from bad to okay from game 1 to game 2. Maybe he turns around and becomes the star we all think he can be. But if nothing else, I think that loyalty, especially with the transfer portal, is going to be more and more important as things go along.
Different world with that transfer portal completely. Statement number 3. Almost feels complete opposite direction here, but Anthony Richardson is the next Tim Tebow.
Well, I mean, he hasn't won a Heisman Trophy yet, so I would say let's hold our horses on that a little bit. But I'm not sure we ever saw Tebow put up plays like this, right? I mean, Tebow at least now the difference is that Tebow put up stats in an era where people were still kind of wondering whether Urban Meyer's real offense would work and whether Tebow could throw the ball, and he was putting up video game stats. What did he have, like 50 touchdowns the year he won the Heisman and that sort of stuff. And he had a defense couldn't stop anybody either in 2007 when he won the Heisman Trophy. But Tebow was also a huge part of a national championship team in 2006, and then the leader of a national championship team in 2008. And so the next Tim Tebow is more than just playing quarterback. It's sort of capturing the imagination of Gator Nation. It's having your teammates buy in. It's all the different things that were part of being Tim Tebow. I'm not ready to put Richardson's number up in the Ring of Honor, but if he averages 38 yards per play for the rest of his career, we won't be able to keep him out. That's for sure.
So you're going with emotion on that statement?
I'm going with emotion on that.
All right. Statement number 4. Bowman and Davis should be getting the bulk of the carries in the running back room going forward.
I think that's truth. I mean, I think Malik Davis has home run capabilities. I think DeMarcus Bowman has shown that he has home run capabilities. I think Dameon Pierce had a really nice game yesterday, but I don't think he's as dynamic as the other 2 guys. Same thing with Naquan Wright. We haven't really seen very much Leonard or Lingard. It looks like they're just going to give everybody 5 or 6 carries a game and sort of keep them healthy over the course of the year. And that'll probably be the way that they do it. But, I think, there are only a few guys on the field who can hit home runs. Richardson's one of them. if you can get more of them on the field at the running back position, I think you got to do it because, the reality is that you only get so many shots. And what you don't want is you don't want a 10-yard gain that could have been an 80-yard gain to only be a 10-yard gain because the guy got tripped up by the ankles because he wasn't quite as fast as his replacement. And so, yeah, there are a lot of different things to the running back position, obviously blocking and pass protection and those sorts of things. But given the struggles that Florida is having when it comes to throwing the ball and reading defenses, I think giving the ball to the running back and getting out of the way might be something they'd want to do.
Do you think this pitch count type of approach toward the running back room is the best way to do it? Or I understand the idea that we just talked about with the transfer portal and keeping guys happy, but if Bowman comes in next week or Davis or whatever, rips off a big run on the first drive with Bam, is this going to be a type of thing where we start to see as we get into SEC play, we're going to go with the hot hand and we're going to stick with that. We're not going to see this type of balanced approach going forward.
So running back's interesting when it comes to that because I think some of what you do there is actually in preparation for the NFL. The last thing you want to do is give some guy 400 carries and then have him be completely banged up when he goes to the pros. So rotating 4 or 5 guys to keep them all fresh makes a whole lot of sense. Plus, the length of the SEC season, you really want them to be fresh when you're playing those games against Georgia and Florida State and later on in the year. Now, the alternative to that is you got to have a guy show enough that he can be a high-level NFL draft pick, right? So a 6th-round NFL draft pick doesn't make a ton of money, but if he's got talent to be a first-round pick, he's not going to sit there and want to stand behind guys who are going to be 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th-round picks or undrafted free agents. And so that's the thing I think you got to sort of determine. Now, the good news is Malik Davis is one of the older guys. Dameon Pierce is now one of the older guys. Lingard and Bowman are younger, right sort of in between. So there is a little bit of a hierarchy in terms of when those guys graduate, when those guys would be looking to go to the pros. But I don't know. I think if I were somebody who thought I had NFL level talent, I would want more than 5 carries a game. And so if I was a running back looking at this Florida program saying, do I want to come here? And they go, yeah, we'll get you 6. We'll play as a true freshman. You're like, yeah, that's great, but I'm going to get 6 carries. And then when I'm a senior, I'm going to get 7 carries. Woohoo. Right. But again, is that because they're not differentiating themselves in practice, that they're all good and no one really stands out amongst the rest? Only the players and the coaches know that. I think that would be the thing that would really sort of drive me to the transfer portals if I knew that I was better than the other guys who were in there and just wasn't getting the playing time because of seniority or some other reason.
I'll be interested to see if that approach changes a little bit in the SEC play here. It's easier when you know you're the more talented team, you're going to win big, FAU, USF, to kind of plan it out like that. I don't know if you're necessarily going to see that as much against Bama, LSU, Georgia, but we'll see. We'll see. It seems to be going that direction overall. Xavier Henderson has established himself as the clear number 2 option behind Copeland in the passing game.
Yeah, I'm buying on that. I think that one's truth. The real reason, though, is because it looks like he's Emory Jones' preferred receiver, right? When you think about who Emory Jones is going to, Henderson seems to be the guy he's going to. When you look at who Anthony Richardson going to, then that seems to be Jacob Copeland. And so that's great. I'm sure that Jones is going to go to Copeland more and more as the season progresses and all that sort of stuff. But at the same time, if Emory Jones is going to get the bulk of the starts, Anthony Richardson also, we got to see what happens with the injuries when it comes to Richardson. And so if Richardson's injured and Emory Jones is in there a lot, it looks like he really feels comfortable throwing the ball to Xavier Henderson. And so, yeah, I expect he's going to be the number 2 guy moving forward, maybe even jumping into the number 1 spot, depending upon what happens at the starting quarterback position.
Well, FAU, done. USF behind us. On to Alabama on the SEC play. We're finally jumping in to the games that everybody's been dying to get to since this schedule was announced. How you feeling about this team after 2 games heading into Alabama?
We're where we need to be, right? Winning games by 20 plus points. And, we found out a lot about the quarterback position, some of it good, some of it bad. I think we found out a lot about the offensive line. Most of that has been good. I think we found out a little bit about the defense, though they haven't really been challenged yet in a big way. But at the end of the day, you can only win the games in front of you, right? And you played the audio earlier of teams that are not winning games in front of them against Jacksonville State and against Notre Dame. And, they celebrated a loss against Notre Dame and then came out flat against Jacksonville State and paid for it. Florida came out and it was 35-3 at the end of the half. And yeah, you can say you wish they'd played better. You can say you wish they hadn't lost the second half 17-7. You can say a lot of those things, but at the end of the day, 2-0, Alabama's coming into your house. Now's when it counts, right? You can win every game by 3 points and you're fine. You're in the playoffs, right? So it doesn't matter how pretty it is. It just matters that you get the job done. The question is, do they have enough to get the job done? I don't know that we have that answer yet, but I think we're going to have that answer come Saturday night.
Can't wait. Can't wait. Looking forward to it. All right, Will, another episode of Stand Up and Holler in the books here. Thank you to everybody for joining us for another episode, and we'll send it out. We'll see you again on Wednesday for the Alabama preview, full episode previewing the Florida-Alabama game. Looking forward to it, Will.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, everybody, for supporting us, both subscribing to the YouTube channel, but then also supporting us over on Patreon. We do release bonus episodes of Stand Up and Holler. They're 15, 20 minutes. It's one extra topic over there. There's a newsletter that I put out now weekly for Patreon as well. So it's as little as $2 to go over there and sign up and get the bonus episodes, Stand Up and Holler. Go check it out, or patreon.com/read and reaction if you want to support Nick and I, what we're doing here, and if you like the show.
All right. Let's send it out. Go Gators.
Yeah, man. Go Gators. Big week.
Thank you for watching this episode of Stand Up and Holler. Be sure to subscribe to the Read and Reaction YouTube channel. Join our Patreon community at Read and Reaction for bonus content each week. And check out our website at readandreaction.com. I'm Nick Knutson, joined by Will Miles. And as always, go Gators.